Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit, the Minister for Health, Dr. Irving McIntyre, other cabinet members, the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Health, Letitia Lestrade-Wyke, the Chief Medical Officer and Consultant, Dr. Kevin Ferrara, Hospital Medical Director, Dr. Ruby Blanc, National Epidemiologist, Dr. Shaluddin Ahmed, other medical officials, our members of the media, and of course to our viewing and listening public, good evening. Thanks for joining us for this second press briefing on COVID-19. We understand your anxiety as the COVID-19 situation on our island continues to unfold, and that is why we are here once again this evening to provide you with factual, comprehensive, and up-to-date information. As we continue to grapple with this pandemic, it is the goal of the Ministry of Health and, of course, by extension, the government of Dominica, to give you the assurances that you need and the relevant information so you may protect yourself and your family. And as we begin, I'd like to welcome to give a few remarks the Minister, or rather the Chief Medical Officer and Consultant, Dr. Kevin Ferrara.
Protocol is observed. Fellow Dominicans, good evening. As you are aware, the SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 virus has made an unwelcome entry into our land. It was just a few days ago our first case was diagnosed. This, however, was inevitable. Dominica for some time has been preparing for this eventuality. In particular, the Ministry of Health has been preparing by means of public education and putting systems in place to diagnose, to treat, and to prevent the spread of this deadly virus. Let me just tell you some of these things. At the present, at the Dominica-China Friendship Hospital, all elective consultations and treatments have been discontinued. That is, we only see emergencies, except for laboratory services and oncology services. When one arrives at the hospital gates for any condition, your temperature will be taken and a brief history will be taken from you. If you have respiratory symptoms, you will be further assessed. And if you fit the case definition for COVID-19, you'll be isolated and tested. If not, you are discharged or treated as your condition demands. At present, there are 8 isolation rooms at the DCFH. The intensive care facilities at the DCFH has been expanded to include 4 additional ventilators, and another 10 are due to arrive in a week or so. All tests for COVID-19 are done on site by the National Laboratory, and results are available within 24 hours. A COVID hospital has been established in Portsmouth, housing for about 25 patients who would need inpatient observation. This hospital is equipped with x-rays, laboratory services, and the right complement of medical and nursing staff. It also has a portable ventilator on site in the event that someone suddenly deteriorates, that they can be safely transported to the Princess Margaret Hospital, the DCFH, alive. At the Charles Douglas Airport, or Douglas Charles Airport, the now only legal means of entry to Dominica at this time, all individuals are screened, the temperature taken, and they undergo a similar process as obtains at the DCFH. Every individual now entering Dominica through this port is quarantined at a facility in Portsmouth for 14 days. This facility houses about 120 patients. Now, fellow Dominicans, I need to tell you that the problem of COVID-19 is not the problem of the Ministry of Health only. It depends on every one of us to make sure that we do not spread the virus into our neighbors and our friends. We must stay at home. We must observe safe distancing, and we must wash our hands thoroughly. And we must be mindful that we do not have the right to hurt others. When you are being negligent and you are aware that you are infected with the virus and go about the villages or wherever spreading the virus, you are really causing great harm, excuse me, to other individuals. I thank you.
And our thanks to the Chief Medical Officer and Consultant, Dr. Kervin Ferrara. Of course, as the dynamics change, we as a nation also have to make changes, and we have to commit to what is the new normal for us. And Dr. Ruby Blanc is here. She's the hospital medical director. She'll provide us with a medical update and a report.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining this press briefing. As you would have been made aware, there are 2 inpatient isolation sites where COVID-19 patients are being cared for. These 2 sites are one at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital and 2 at the St. James Building located in Portsmouth. The decision was made that the patients who are asymptomatic, meaning with no complaints, signs, or symptoms, or with very mild signs or symptoms, will be admitted and cared for at the St. James Building in Portsmouth. The more serious and critical patients would be seen at the Dominica China Friendship Isolation Unit. There is at present, or there are patients in both of the facilities at present, that is both at the isolation units in St. James and at the unit at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital. Most of the management for the patients at St. James would be in the form of monitoring to detect any deterioration as soon as it happens in their clinical condition. I am pleased to announce that at this point, the patients at St. James are stable and they continue to be monitored closely. The patients at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, as indicated, are those who would have been experiencing some kind of clinical, significant respiratory or breathing complaints. And treatment in those cases would include essentially support therapy, such as IV or intravenous fluids, as is necessary, oxygen therapy, where necessary, antibiotics would also be started, and other drugs that would essentially help in improving of the respiratory symptoms and complaints. We all know that if patients' breathing issues become very severe, then they would be placed on a ventilator. At this point, we do not have any ventilated patients, and I am sure we will all pray that we will not need to have any patients being ventilated. We have been very fortunate to have staff who very willingly consented and in some cases offered to take care of our COVID positive patients. At both institutions, that is at the hospital and St. James, we have a mix of Dominican doctors and doctors from the Cuban Technical Assistance Program. We remain very grateful to these doctors for willingly undertaking the task of providing care to these patients. I must use this opportunity to say thanks to all the staff of the Ministry of Health, both at the hospital, at St. James, and within the primary healthcare services, who in so many different ways, both on the front line and behind the scenes, provided support during this health situation. No, COVID-19, again, as was said, is not a condition or problem that belongs only to the government and the Ministry of Health. We as a country must do all we can to limit the spread of the disease. By now, everybody should know by heart the importance of social distancing, respiratory or cough etiquette, hand hygiene, taking proper care of yourselves, eating properly, resting properly so as to build strong and healthy immune systems. At this stage, we must be our brother's keepers. If you develop any symptoms, the hotlines which have been made available are there to be called for further advice as to how you should proceed. Let us work collaboratively to get hold of this disease. I believe as a nation, if we do what we have to do, we can combat it and come out on top.
Our thanks to Dr. Ruby Blanc, the hospital medical director, for that report. Of course, as Dr. Blanc mentioned, several strategies and protocols have been put in place and are being implemented for the safety of all. At this point, we call on the national epidemiologist, Dr. Shaluddin Ahmed, to give a statistical analysis.
Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Roosevelt Skerrit, Honorable Minister of Health, Wellness and New Health Initiative Dr. Arvin McIntyre, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Carvin Ferreira, our Hospital Medical Director Dr. Ruby Blanc, Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Health, and media and listeners, good evening and salam. First, let me share with you some figures that I know of. Figures concerning laboratory testing and the result. Thus far, we have sampled 142 cases, and total number tested 118. Number of positive cases thus far 11. Total negative 103, and 4 tests require rerun, meaning it is borderline, so they would like to rerun in order to be conclusive. In addition to that, I would like to say that all confirmed cases have been hospitalized at the isolation unit, as you heard from Dr. Ruby Blanc. 10 of the 11 confirmed cases are from one location. All subsequent 9 cases are contacts of the index case. And contact of the contacts are ongoing. Thus, for 12 contacts identified from the initial contact investigation, additional 17 contacts of the contacts were detected. So a total of 29 persons are under observation from that one index case. Based on our laboratory result, we may conduct further investigation and contact tracing at the community level. I would like to say some word on quarantine and quarantine persons and at the quarantine place, at the government quarantine facility, that is. I would like to say that we have added, or there additional 2 apartments are being included in our total of 4 apartments right now in order to accommodate the passengers that are coming from outside of Dominica, in order to quarantine them in those facilities. So at this time, total of 58 are occupying in those 4 apartments. Overall, so far, 86 were quarantined at these government facilities. So this is, in summary, what the figures that I have to share with you. However, as our Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, this is a war, and war just begun. Tonight, I stand before you to ask you to be part of this war against this COVID-19 virus. And things that I need to do in order to flatten this curve, I reiterate: social distancing, frequent hand washing and sanitizing, minimum level. I also ask you to maintain respiratory etiquette. And if you are sick, stay home until you fully recover. You also need to take the responsibility in order to provide necessary provision to keep our elderly folks at home in well-sanitized environment and good health. Also, keep watching your health is very important. Nutrition is very essential part of this fighting against this coronavirus. You have to be well hydrated and proper rest, and which will take you a long way in fight of this virus. Again, I would like to say, from the part of Ministry of Health, we continue to fight against this virus. We are continue to do identification at the community level. We continue to isolate those who are required to be isolated at the government facility, and some are at the home through home quarantine. We continue to test those needs to be tested. So far, Dominica has conducted highest number of testing through PCR testing in the OECS countries. And we continue to do contact tracing, vigorous contact tracing, that is. So our fight is on. Now it is your turn to listen to us and do as we request you to do. So thank you for listening, and thanks for everyone. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for all those numbers, all the data. Dr. Ahmed is responsible for surveillance in the Ministry of Health. And at this point, we'd like to call on the Honorable Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, to give his remarks.
Thank you. Let me greet everybody, the Minister, and, Dr. Ferrer, who is the Acting Chief Medical Officer and Consultant, Dr. Blanc, our HMD, and Dr. Ahmed, who is the Chief Epidemiologist for the government. And of course, the listening public, the viewing public, the media present, and of course, our chairperson, Ms. Harry. This is not something that is caused by anybody, and certainly it is not something that calls for pointing of fingers or criticizing. We have a duty and a responsibility as citizens of Dominica and residents of our country to play our part in our simple way and also our profound way. From the time we in this country got to know about this coronavirus, which was later classified as COVID-19 by the WHO, we started our preparation. And preparation involves a number of things behind the scenes that do not necessarily require public demonstrations. And they were regular meetings. We have received advice from WHO PAHO and from CAFA. Our Minister for Health has been literally frontline of our preparations. At the OECS level, there were meetings almost literally every day with ministers of health, and also at the CARICOM level. There were also meetings of CARICOM, heads of government, heads of state, and Dominica has participated in all of these meetings without a fail. We started very early the public education and sensitization that was ably led by the Health Promotion Unit, because we believe that education, information was always going to be key in our fight in this virus. And we have been on the radio, we have been having public pronouncements. The Health Promotion Unit has been going to communities, going to business places to provide information to the public. We also recognizing the imminence of this virus. At the time, we were about 80% towards our accreditation of our national lab. We were able, with the help of PAHO, to advance the other actions in terms of training of our staff at the lab, and to allow for certification. This is why we were one of the first countries within the Caribbean which had the capacity nationally to test for COVID-19. And for these tests to be accepted and recognized by the international health system. And our staff at the lab, are fully trained to conduct this test. And even though we have that national capacity to test and is accepted by the international health system, we also send this test to the CDC in the United States to go over for us and to ensure that we are certainly saying what is actually the case. And we have been told by the CDC that what we're doing in Dominica is very efficient and certainly very accurate. And you've heard Dr. Ahmed says in a couple of cases, the lab has had to rerun just to ensure that we are 100% sure. So we're not accepting any borderline results. We want to accept either positive or negative. So we have the national capacity to test. If we did not have the national capacity to test, what is the option of Dominica? We would have had to use the facilities of CAFA in Trinidad. And with communication, transportation completely demobilized, what would happen to us? And so it's, even with the case that the first case which was tested positive, the contact tracing has been very efficient thus far, very aggressive thus far. But even with that aggression, even with that efficiency of contact tracing, if we do not have the lab capacity in Dominica to test nationally, that would create a challenge. And so our results are able to come back to us much faster, and we're able to take action much faster. And that's what happened. So this is why we have to recognize that there's some things that we could do. We could have shut down the country from February 1st and not do any preparation. That will not help us. And I will reference why I believe that will not help us in a while. But what we have been doing is putting the systems in place, identifying the human resources, ensuring that we have the facilities. So very, very quickly, we were able to establish the 8-bed facility, isolation facility at the PMH. and not only relying on ourselves to say that it is certified, PAHO sent a team down of 4 experts who came in and went through the facility, looked at the procedure manual, and said, yes, you have a facility that can adequately provide care and treatment to patients who would who would need hospitalization. So we've been preparing. And so with regards to human resources, we have to ensure that we had adequate resources. And we have to say thank God in Dominica, because in many jurisdictions, getting human resources is a challenge for a number of reasons. And I must say that in my own personal interaction with the leadership at the Ministry of Health, that is to say the administrative leadership of the Ministry of Health, in persons like the hospital medical director and the chief epidemiologist, and with our consultant, Dr. Ferro, and all of the people in the labs and so on, the director of primary health care, the matron, the permanent secretary, the PNO, you name it, at the various leadership, there is a profound sense of commitment, dedication, and seriousness to the task. And that has been able to now trickle down to the administrative structure within the government, within the health system. And so there is motivation at all different levels. This is, I must admit, this is an operation that calls for serious psychological fortitude for these people, because they have to be at the front line, but their family at home, the families at home. But their commitment to the country, and I believe that the country will owe a debt of gratitude to these doctors and nurses and all of these staff, you know, the ward aides and the community health aides, the nurses, the doctors, the orderlies, the cleaners, the cooks. All of these people are playing an important role, and we had to not only identify them, but train them. So all of these things were being done, training the people, because everybody who has to come in to this operation must have some training. And so we have been working on training people in this. Then recognizing that with this virus, as we have been told, it is very contagious, we recognize that an 8-bed facility will not be sufficient. So we started looking at options. The Minister of Health himself leading a team of the Ministry of Health and going out in the field to seek to identify and locate facilities that we could use to treat patients in the event that you have a surge in our country. And we have been able, to date, establish what we call a COVID center. And you heard the medical practitioners speak to what obtains in this facility at Portsmouth. And at that facility, though we have a 24-bed facility, it has space to expand. And there's also an annex building that could be used in the event that we have numbers that we do not want to have. And so we were able to transform a building that was not originally designed to run a hospital. So we effectively have a hospital in Portsmouth, separate from the Armour Hospital. We have Dr. Armour Hospital we have in Portsmouth. And that isolation center is dedicated solely to treat COVID patients, and we currently have some patients there. So we have this facility. Are things perfect? No. No country system has been perfect. None, including the developed countries. Including countries which economy trillion times larger than ours. What we need in our country are people understanding that we have to work together to fight this. The doctors have their role, the nurses have their roles, but we, the citizens, the ordinary citizens, have a role. One, not to misinform people, but to pass on the accurate information that would help people minimize and even eliminate the possibility of they contracting the virus. And what can we do that, as we've been told, to practice? And these are things that I believe that we should be focusing on. Now, so we have been able to put these things in place, and there have been numerous meetings because you have to meet, you have to review, you have to consult, you have to seek advice. This thing is an evolving process. It is not static. And we have always stood near to power for advice, both at the highest level and also at the technical level. Everything we run it by them. And so, as I've been told, you have in this thing has been categorized into levels. Level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3. And in each of these levels, or in some countries they call it stages, there are actions that are recommended that you take. So people wanted us, for example, to close down the country at level 0 when we had no cases. But that's not what is recommended by the experts. And so we have been following, obviously, adapting some of the recommendations of WHO and PAHO to our own cultural nuances and our own circumstances. We convened a meeting of NEPO because we wanted the country to understand that this is not a Ministry of Health fight. This is going to be a national endeavor. And we also have engaged the public in different fora, in terms of consulting with them, in terms of providing them information so that they themselves can be empowered to go out there and provide the information. Now, recognizing that where the human resources are concerned, that you will have a challenge of burnout, fatigue, which is a normal human challenge. We did not sit there and only pray that the Lord will send some good Samaritans to us. We acted. And I wrote a letter to the president of Cuba myself, addressed to the president of Cuba, indicating to him and drawing to his attention the challenge which we have and the need for additional human resources. And based on advice coming from the Ministry of Health, we indicated that in the first instance, 25 nurses would do with ICU training and also infection disease control. And they're sending those nurses to us tomorrow afternoon. We were told that 6 doctors would do, and the 6 doctors should have, at least 2 should have ICU training capacities. And they said, the lab superintendent said to us that we would need some lab techs and ensure that at least 2 would have training in molecular testing. And the Cubans have made those available to us. Within 48 hours, they responded in the affirmative. We also recognizing that we need to get more test kits. And it is because of the presence of the test kits, we are able to do the testing that are required, especially with the contact tracing. And because one of the decisions we had taken, for example, was to test people coming in. So we tested people who came through the ferries last weekend. Every one of them. and we took them straight to the quarantine facilities in Portsmouth. There was one lady who decided that she is not going to go to quarantine, and we tell her you have to go back to Guadeloupe. She's a Dominican dual citizen. She has both a Dominican and French passport, and she decided she's going to go back, and she stayed on the ferry terminal until the ferry came back from Martinique and picked her up and took her back to Guadeloupe. So there are a number of things that we've been doing in preparation. We could have acted in panic. We could have taken decisions out of fear. And what would those decisions be? While instead of being sober, being clear-minded, being guided by professional advice, and taking the appropriate decisions at the appropriate times. And every time you see that we have moved from one level to the other, we have taken decisions. We have acted because we're not prepared not to act. And we've acted. Now, the people who have said, okay, Skerrit, shut the borders. We should have shut the borders long time ago. But tell me, what would you do as Prime Minister? Because everybody out there saying what decision the Prime Minister could take, but they're looking at this from their own narrow perspective. I have many other things to consider before I arrive at a decision. I consult a wide cross-section of people. I rely on the advice of the medical practitioners. And we also have international experts who are assisting us with advice. But what would you do as Prime Minister if you have Dominicans who went up to Guadeloupe to shop, and then the President of the French Republic shuts his borders and says nobody should come out of their homes at all, and we have Dominicans who are out there with no money to buy food, nowhere to sleep, and who do not have access to the social services of Guadeloupe and Martinique? So the event that one of these people or all of them were to get sick, they would stay and die like cockroaches in some shed in Guadeloupe and Martinique. And that's what we want to have for our citizens. What do I do? I am very accessible. I mean, I had a number of messages from people in Martinique and Guadeloupe messaging me, we're stuck in Guadeloupe, we have nowhere to go. Luckily for us, luckily for them too, and their families, the French authorities authorized the ferry to transport them out of Guadeloupe because the ports were closed. And they gave us a 3-day window to take everybody out of Guadeloupe and Martinique. And I will say to the citizens of Dominica that we allow the ferry to come in, but only to bring in Dominican citizens. We did not allow any foreign national to come into the country on these 3 days of ferry. There were 9 French citizens who had tickets to come to Dominica and were denied boarding because the ferries told them the authorities in Dominica would not allow you to disembark. And another reason why we allow the ferries to come in, let's face it, we're talking among ourselves as Dominicans. We have had a culture, it's part of our tradition in this country of coming to Dominica through back door. And if we do not allow people to come in through the ports and you can know who comes in and have their addresses, and be able to track them and test them, you would have a number of people coming in through the back door, sliding in, and nobody would know that they were there. And they may very well be a carrier. They may very well be infected with the virus. And even though we have Dominicans coming through the back door, that's why we have to increase our security of our borders. And this is why we're appealing to the communities. Anybody who you know has come into the country through a back door, let us know, because we need to know these people. Because they pose a risk to the society. And anybody who came in through the back door, you have to let us know, because it is in your interest. It is in the interest of your family, and it is in the interest of the wider community. And then there's the issue of the airport. We have students in the United States of America. We have students in the United Kingdom, in Canada, who are at school. The semester is not over. The schools are closed. They were allowed to stay at the dorms. In some instances, the school authorities have told our students, all their students, including the Dominican students, that they can no longer leave on campus because they may need those facilities for quarantine if the need arises in those states. And then we have our children who are stranded in the United States of America with no access to housing, no access to funds, and no access to health insurance if they were to fall sick. And no family, many of them, no family, no relatives in the states where they're studying. And what do? And what should their government do? Tell them we have COVID-19 and we don't want them because they may be carrying it? And I ask our citizens, what would you advise the Prime Minister if it was your daughter who was in the United States and wanted to come back, and she had nowhere to stay? And I ask you, had you been in Guadeloupe with no money and nowhere to sleep and no health insurance, and you cannot go out because in Guadeloupe you need a certificate to come out of your home, what would you say to me if you were to WhatsApp me and tell me you were stuck in Guadeloupe? That things nice in Guadeloupe, don't worry, you'll be okay. You'll be harassing me to get you home. And that's what many of them did. That's what many of them did. And in order to contain and to manage this COVID virus, this is why we started testing these people who are coming in. And then we advised, look, we need to conserve on resources. So let us now move to a 14-day quarantine. And people who are coming from the extreme hotspots, we test them, or people who are showing signs of the virus. So anybody who comes to Dominica is sent to Portsmouth. There are people who do not like the quarantine. They do not want it. They say that they have to go home. And I will say so publicly. I have not consulted the Minister for Health on this matter, but I think I have the authorization to say this. The Minister of Health, his niece came in recently on a flight, and she's quarantined. Her mother had a room set up and separated from everybody else, nice, everything, and so she's quarantined for the next 14 days. So, because we wanted to ensure as far as possible we can contain this thing and to manage it. But this is what it is. We have taken decisions as the need arises. So I want us to understand that this is not a time for politics. And I have seen the comments of people out there, and I will defer my response to some other time, but I am now preoccupied with the country's efforts to manage and to contain this virus in our country. So those who wish to play politics with it and figure, well, they want to attack Skerrit or make him look bad or whatever it is, that's fine with me. I'm accustomed to this thing because this is not about me. And I hear people criticize nowadays, but the same people who criticize them, we have reached out to them and tell them come to volunteer. We've asked them. We have Dr. Ferreira here. When I called Dr. Ferreira, he came within 15 minutes to offer himself. There are people who we have reached out to and they're helping, and there's some who have reached out to and refused to help. And I see these very same people out there criticizing the health professionals, criticizing the state's response, just because they want to be politics of it. And my view that any doctor who is speaking out there with medical doctors should be speaking from a scientific standpoint. And if you're not speaking from a scientific standpoint, then something is wrong. Because it's not helping anybody. Because, my friend, Prince getting that, Prime Minister's getting that, Prime Minister's wife getting that, the vagrant on the road getting it, priests getting it, pastors getting it, Muslims, Hindus, rabbis, Jews, Christians, Gentiles. Getting it. So my admonition to us, all of us, is that let us follow the advice of the Ministry of Health. Yes, we will send people home. But when I was trying to forget, wiping my face because, so I read a little sweat and I go, I'll bathe, Let us work together. Let us work together. So when we send you home, what are you going to do when you go home? You're going to walk the streets and you guys going to play basketball and defy the instructions? So it comes down at the end of the day to each of us following the advice and the guidance given. And leave the other things to the professionals who have to do it. And and I see the same people who criticize me, saying that I should have closed down the country. The same people who criticize me when a hurricane is coming, I tell people go home for their safety. They say, But there's a good God. I'm warning you guys. I'm warning you guys. There's a good God in this. And so I want us, my friends, to pay attention to a couple of things. One, we all know the nurses and doctors who are the front line of this. The firemen, and I forgot to single out the firemen, and the fire chief, Mr. Dupuy, and the deputy fire chief, Mr. Later. These two guys and the fire chief, the extraordinary leadership and commitment and dedication that this fire chief has shown in this and many other instances, my friends. I believe if all of us had that attitude, things would be fine. And the firemen, the ambulance drivers who go out and pick up the patients with no real complaints, we should be out there looking out for their families, ensuring that their families have a meal and whatever assistance we can give to their families. These are the people on the front line. The nurses down there at the COVID center, also at the hospital. The Cuban comrades who are here at the front line with us. These are the things these are the good things, the positive things. Give them the encouragement. But if they're out there on the front line and all they're hearing us criticizing each other and so on and not paying attention to the real issue of what can we do as individual citizens, then what happens? I also want us, as I've said before in my previous addresses, the people 70 years and above should stay in completely. I said to you, I know you love your early morning, your 6:30 Mass. I am happy that the bishop is now doing it by radio. Let us stay up and pray. The Bible says, where two or more gathered in my name, then we're okay. And if you're the bishop preaching for you, your pastor or your Muslim Imam, then great. Because these are extraordinary circumstances. And if you obey these instructions, then the good Lord will even bless you more. So let us stay indoors and let us have the younger ones help the older ones. I've said, and I've gotten some messages that people told me that they have gone to do messages for the senior citizens and they put the groceries by the door as we instructed because you don't want to have any contact with the senior citizens. People with underlying conditions asking you to stay away, stay home, watch Netflix, watch some cartoon or something, and listen to the official advisory from the Ministry of Health. And then the issue of social distancing. We've been talking about this all along. Social distancing. I've heard the people from the Health Promotion Unit talking about this. These are decisions that we have to take. We have to be mindful of those things. Let us look out for each other. If we hear something, let us put it out there. The other thing I want to talk about is for us to desist from calling the hotlines and abusing this thing. People are calling them and threatening them, saying all sorts of, and they're occupying the lines from people who may have an emergency to report. So what we have decided to do is to record all calls so that as part of the international best practices, because we want to be able to record the correct information and relay it to the appropriate people within the chain of command. I have consulted with the chief medical doctor and others, and we are taking a decision as of today that the Douglas Charles Airport will be closed as of midnight tonight to all travelers. The passengers who are in transit tonight, and we'll allow them to come in, but the airport will be open for medical emergencies and to receive medical supplies and to receive medical personnel. And of course, the Secretary to the Cabinet and the Financial Secretary will speak to those details, more details tomorrow. Earlier today, you would have seen the decision we took to advise public officers with underlying medical conditions to stay home from work and to work from home. And those persons were asked to stay home. And we are taking a further decision to have public servants to work from home. And of course, those details will be given by the Secretary of the Cabinet because they're internal memos that have to be transmitted. But the essential services will be required to come to work, and there will be some particular public officers who will be required to come to work because we have to continue coordinating the state's response to these things. If you're wondering whether I'm going to be staying home, the Prime Minister doesn't fit in these categories, neither does the Cabinet or ministers. We are at work 24 hours. And I said the Secretary of Cabinet tomorrow morning will give more specific details on these things. And I asked the Financial Secretary to be in touch with the private sector entities and for them to also follow the decision of the government in that regard. We will move to regulating these things from a legal standpoint. The drafts have been prepared and they'll be approved tomorrow morning. And the Attorney General has prepared the draft regulations to deal with this. So, and we've been speaking to the banks and the private sector because we want to ensure that while there will be a shutdown, people can have access to services, albeit in a different format. And of course, those details will be shared with the public. But our position is, if you have no business outside, stay inside. Stay inside. This is not a, this, you know, every time the government takes a decision, sometimes some people go out there, and now you're going to see parties out there, people are going to say they're having COVID party, and so forth, and these things. We had it during the hurricane time. You had a curfew, and people had curfew parties. You know, the police couldn't get to their work, essential service couldn't get to their work. So, but it is incumbent upon us, I'm saying to each one of us must play our part, my dear brothers and sisters. And I am not, for me, as I've said before, my preoccupation is the safety of the citizens and residents of Dominica. And whatever action we have to take at the appointed time, we shall take those actions. And as I said last night in my address, there's going to be an extraordinarily negative impact on the economy, and every echelon of society will be impacted on this. And at the appropriate time, we shall engage our social partners on fashioning the country's response from a economic and financial standpoint. But as for now, our preoccupation has to be for our continued preparation and our vigorous tracing, our vigorous testing to ensure we can come into contact with everybody who we need to get in contact with and know where we stand with regards to COVID-19. So I want to say to us, my dear brothers and sisters, now, let us, at least for now on this, unite. You know, we have to, those of you rather in the quarantine facility, you have to understand we're doing it for your own good, and we're doing it for the good of your family. Just imagine if we don't put you in this quarantine and you go home and your little 5-month-old daughter who you have not seen in 3 weeks, or your children, your grandparents who in the 90s, suffering from hypertension and diabetes and so forth, and you come there and you kiss everybody they haven't seen you in 3 weeks, and then you hug everybody, and you're having this, you know, you have a lollipop and the child takes it from you. My friend, understand this. Understand this. I know there were some challenges with the delivery of meals. As of lunchtime, we have rectified this, and going forward, the meals will be delivered on time. But all these things, you expect these things in logistical challenges. You go overseas and you pay your big money to go into a 5-star hotel, and you get there 9 o'clock, they tell you check-in is 3 o'clock. 6 o'clock, you still haven't got in your room, but you've paid your big money. So if we go somewhere and you have to wait for an hour or half an hour, my friend, I mean, what does that have to do on Facebook? And want to create a sensation on this thing. So we have to appreciate. Let us all stay calm. Let us all stay calm on this. And because we recognize that in some cases, people are not respecting the self-quarantine. You know, if you self-quarantine an idiot, he's on Facebook showing that he's driving around. And then people blame me for that. Instead of telling this idiot that you should be responsible, they're blaming me for this. You know? So let us remain focused. I'm sorry for speaking so long, but I felt it necessary to share with you and also having a conversation with you, our citizens and residents. And to appeal to us to remain focused. You know, and now is not the time for politics. The next election is the next 5 years' time. Now is not time for politics. Now is a time for us to be able to work together and to see our country through this difficult path, to see the world through this difficult path. And instead of spending our God-given talent and breath of life on negative things, let's deal with positive things. We are open for advice. We're open to guidance. But when somebody wants to give the government advice, and I have not gotten the letter, but it's everywhere, are we serious about this thing? Do we really mean it? You know, do we really mean it? And, you know, I mean, come and see me. Come. You know, Pastor Rodney, who normally criticizes me on radio, so, I mean, he's been very constructive in the public consultation. I told him so. I commended him. I also told him that, you know, when you go in the radio program, continue being on the positive light. You know, I know he doesn't mind I mention that in a joke way, because in this very stressful and high state of anxiety, we have to laugh. We have to smile. You understand? Because we also have to manage the psychosocial aspect of the human being. You see what I'm saying? And so I want to reiterate that the airport will be closed. We will keep the port open for commercial purposes, to allow for much needed supplies to come in, and for DHL and these services to continue. I said the FS will give details of this. The issue of the submission of our VAT returns, the FS will give details on this. And our income tax, I know the deadline is end of this month. The Financial Secretary will give some details on the government's action to facilitate the general public on these matters and so forth. But I think the two things that have been preoccupying the minds of the public, really, it has to do with the airport and the closure of the airport, and also the issue of work. Because somebody said to me, you know, Skerrit, I was disappointed in your speech last night. I said, okay, no problem. What were you disappointed about? There's work tomorrow. That's what the person told me. So the person's only disappointment was that I did not declare no work today, Wednesday. But the person, I tell the person, pay attention to the other very important aspects and so on. So I want to thank again. You know, words cannot express my gratitude on behalf of all Dominicans for the efforts and so on. I mean, Dr. Ferrero, who still looks young, but he has age. You know, I mean, is at this 24 hours, you know, and helping in the vineyard and so forth. You know, and there are people younger than him out there. Come forward. We can still use help. You may not be on the front line, but you can be in the war room. You can give advice. You can give encouragement. So you might be a consultant, medical consultant, a specialist. You may be in private practice. If you see and say about helping, Dr. Mark can be reached. And we will find a spot for you. If you're in the private sector, you're part of the Builders Constructors Association, you believe that you have logistics experience, and you want to oversee the logistical aspects of the quarantine facility, then we come forward. Bring your expertise. You see, bring your expertise. So we are open to receiving added help, and we can place you places. If you think that you can help the health promotion unit to cover more ground, come. You have journalists background, Carla. You have a nice voice sometimes in news. You know, you come forward. You see what I'm saying? And tell your comrade Matt also, you know. Yeah, he's listening. Yeah, Matt, you know, you leave this talk show for the time being and come help the health promotion unit to educate the masses. You see, Steve does a good job on the radio, you know. But if you are Carla and Matt on board, you know, giving information, you see, and Matt using this program every morning to repeat what Nurse Shillingford and the wonderful team at the health promotion unit were doing. I mean, my brother, 50% of the problem would overcome. You understand? 50% of the problem. So let us work together. We're open to criticism, but let it be constructive. Let it not be destructive. Let it not have a political slant. Let it not have an anti-Skerrit slant, because none of these things don't help anybody, my brother. Nobody. Some idiot went to the Congress and wore a gas mask, and then he had to be tested. He ended up getting it, ridiculing it. You see what I'm saying? So this knows no borders, no boundaries, and so forth. You know, I also want to thank the Chinese government. The Chinese government They will be providing us with some supplies. Among other things, they'll be giving us some ventilators and 1,500 testing kits. They'll be providing to us. I'm hoping that this can come in hopefully next week, recognizing all the challenges now with transportation, with all of these borders being closed. But we're trying to work with logistics and so forth, and other protective gear, and a number of other supplies that the Chinese government is seeking to provide to us and so forth. And they've also offered human resources. We've been consulting with them on their own experiences in China. So they've been very helpful and so on. And I say, muchas gracias por todo Cubanos. So all the Cuban brothers, for the support, because the 35 comrades from Cuba who will be here, God willing, tomorrow on a special chartered flight would certainly bring much needed motivation and encouragement to all of the health practitioners and certainly the whole of Dominica. So we're going to thank the ambassador and thank the president of Cuba and the Cuban Revolution for the assistance. So let us work together, my brothers and sisters. You're going home tomorrow, stay home. And if people are not going to self-respect this thing, then we will have to move to the next level of curfew and all these things, and that's not necessary. It should not be necessary, because we're asking you to stay home for your good. Don't stay home because you don't want to work. We're sending you home to protect yourself and to stay safe. Thank you very much, and God bless all of us.
Now, thanks to the Honorable Prime Minister. At this point, we're going to take a few questions from the press. So if you have any questions for the presenters, you are welcome to do so right now.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Curtis Matthew from DBS Radio, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sheena Harry. My question is about the announcement of increased cases of COVID-19 in Dominica tonight. It was mentioned earlier that 10 out of the 11 people who have been tested positive are from one community. Is there any information as to the other person? In fact, is he related to the others in the communities that was mentioned? My other question before Kale comes in would be, St. Lucia reported earlier today that they don't have the capacity to deal with a full outbreak of COVID-19. Is the same related to Dominica? Can Dominica say the same thing, that we don't have the resources to deal with a full outbreak of COVID-19? I'll come back in a little while again.
Thank you very much, Sheena. Prime Minister had a nice, long, almost impassionate plea there. But he spoke about the testing kit. The Cubans are coming in tomorrow, God is willing. We want to know, will they be quarantined? Will any action be taken as it relates to that? Because everyone who comes in, they're stuck that day, will be quarantined or tested. Also, there's the premature closure of the Douglas Charles Airport. The Prime Minister initially said effective tomorrow. Now he has moved it to tonight. Why? My next question also is, although he spoke about the tax issue, because there's a notice going out about so the people can pay their taxes. We have the 31st, I think, of the month. You have a lot of people who are elderly people who are going to be home. Of course, from also that department is going to be poorly manned. How do we expect to handle that situation? Are we going to see a deferral of that tax situation to a later date? Yeah, just it for now.
And finally, we have Mr. Steve FM.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Sheena. My question is, the people who are being quarantined, who is responsible for their daily meals? Is it the government? or family members in collaboration with the government? And will we ever see a community shutdown at one point? Depends on the number of people who are tested positive and where they're coming from.
Get your questions. So let's begin with the questions posed by Mr. Curtis Matthew on the patients, and I'll call on Dr. Ahmed to give a response to that question.
Thank you for the question. The question number one, if I recall, 10 out of 11 of them from one community, and if there is any relation with the index number 1 with index number 2, the case number 2, I mean. No, there is no relation between case number 1 and case number 2. There are two different communities. And just to shed light on the index number 2, that case actually quarantined himself the moment he stepped in Dominica, the moment he came here. So in that sense, he has been quarantined at home and until he developed symptoms, and then he brought to the hospital. There is not many contacts of him. We are still investigating as to how many or where else we can look into. We are looking everywhere, even beyond the boundary of immigration line. So we are still investigating if there is anyone came really close to him that can be considered as a contact. So investigation is ongoing.
Dr. Ahmed, while you're on the mic, let me just ask a follow-up question. Thank you very much. Sheena, is that okay? Yeah. The question I would like to ask is about the contact tracing. How challenging is this, and is this process continuing as we speak? So do we expect to hear any more information in terms of contact tracing for people in that community that you mentioned earlier on?
No, we do not expect many. If there is anything, very few we may find, but in terms of risk-wise, there will be very mild risky contact, which may be 5 minutes, 15 minutes type of contact, which is by definition of contact tracing. Doesn't fall into that category, but however, we are considering every possibilities if anyone were in contact. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you to Dr. Ahmed, and I'm sure the Honorable Prime Minister has a few responses to your questions as well.
I mean, the reference to our friends in St. Lucia would be attributable to all nations in the world, from the United States to the smallest country in the world, and the largest countries in the world. This is a challenge. This is why, you will see people talk about resources required, the cost of this. It is challenging for the human resources in the front line. So it's going to be challenging to everybody. This is why we are urging the public to practice personal hygiene and to deal with the social distancing. So this is why we've been saying that these are things that we can do. Let's wash our hands properly. You know what I'm saying? Sanitize our hands and so forth. If we're coughing, we've been told how to cough. And those of us, if we feel ill, we cannot jump on a minibus. Stay home. You see, stay away from people. Self-quarantine yourself. And if you're really not feeling well, then you call your medical practitioner, whether it's a private doctor or the public health system. So nobody is 100% prepared for this. This is like a hurricane. You understand? It's like a hurricane. The best you can do is to prepare the best you can. You understand? And where you feel that there are gaps, you get some additional support. This is why we have reached out to the government of Cuba for additional human resources. And we already have in our minds within the health system and the government of signaling to our Cuban friends the possibility of additional human resources. You see what I'm saying? So that is also part of our forward planning to already signal that we may need additional human resources. The issue of why close the Douglas Church now, there is a challenge which we have in respect to the quarantine facilities. And Dr. Ahmed would have told you we have 86 currently, and we expect some more tonight. And so we have, and when we addressed the nation yesterday, we had 7. And today we have 11, the 4 additional positive cases. So that warrants us now to contain the quarantine facilities to the numbers that we have, so that we in a better position to deal with the logistics of it and so forth. But we have allowed sufficient time over the last couple of weeks for Dominicans who really wanted to come home. There were people who had last-minute challenges, people who were supposed to come in weeks in the future who had to forward their return to avoid a situation if they were to fall a victim to this virus in a country where they have no help or anyone and so on. So we give people an opportunity to come back and so forth. And so we have, based on the advice of the chief medical doctor, we have decided to advance the original decision on this in light of the new and prevailing information. In respect to payment of taxes, I said the financial secretary tomorrow will give details on this. I didn't want to burden the country and to distract from the central message tonight on COVID-19. But certainly we will facilitate taxpayers in light of the decisions of the government and in light of the current situation regards COVID-19. So the FS will give details of this on how we prepare to facilitate taxpayers. The daily meals, not only the daily meals are covered, but we covered the cost of accommodation. So we in fact will be paying the proprietors of these private establishments to house the people there. We had a challenge earlier today, but thank God we were able to get some 58 rooms confirmed today, this afternoon. And so we are preparing those rooms for the folks who will be coming in tonight and so forth. So we're providing 3 meals. We're also providing to people who do not have basic items like toothbrushes and towels and toothpaste and other basic supplies and so forth. And obviously some of them would have come in to the country with some of these things and they have it. And I believe in limited instances, family members have been able to facilitate this. As I said, there were challenges with regards to the timeliness of the delivery of the meals. But we were able to put some systems in place, and I was told today that the lunch did come on time, much to the pleasure of the people along there. And we're going to observe tomorrow to see what time breakfast will come. So, and the fact remains too, we want to be transparent if you as far as practically possible, not to bore you with details. But you have a situation where people whom we would have contacted to provide services do not want to go to these facilities. You understand? So we have a challenge. So it is not that we don't want to buy the lunch and bring it on time. It's that people who we have contacted are not prepared to bring the lunch. Though there's no real need to fear if you follow the protocols that have been advised, that you've been advised. And so what we're doing is increasing the number of service providers and to go through the division of labor. So if you're providing breakfast, only breakfast. You can't provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And get a different group to provide lunch, get a different group to provide dinner, so that, by the time you prepare breakfast, you have to start preparing for lunch, and we don't want to focus on breakfast done, your day done. And that's when it. So the government is covering all of the expenses from the airport to when the quarantine period will be over, and we'll also provide transportation to your residents, no matter where you live in Dominica. Okay? I think reference was made about the Cubans. We have been advised by the Cuban authorities that the people listening to us have gone through the protocols, and that they are in a position to go to work immediately, as they've done in Italy and other countries that they've been deployed to, because the Cubans are mindful of the fact that these people are coming in, and they're coming into a particular circumstance and situation, and that those who they would have sent, because this has been going around for some time, and so a lot of the health professionals in Cuba would have been taken away from the system, knowing that they will always look to Cuba to assist. Whether it's in Ebola, the Cubans were leading in the fight against this. So the Cubans recognizing this. But notwithstanding that, we have been in consultation with the health professionals, and there are additional protocols that will be kicked in once the Cubans arrive. But I'll leave that to the health professionals to deal with. But we have been in discussions with this. I think I've answered the questions that have been asked, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks to all media partners for asking those very important questions, burning questions that I'm sure the general public would have liked answers to as well. Now, of course, we've heard from the leader of the nation, and it would only be fitting that before we end the press briefing that we hear from the leader of the Ministry of Health, Wellness and New Health Investment, Dr. Irvin McIntyre.
Okay, pleasant good evening to all the listeners and to everyone gathered here. As we said, protocol has been established already. So, well, you've been seeing me quite often, and you'll keep seeing me again, and I don't have an issue with that. I'll come and give you all the information that you want to get, because we're in this fight together. We all know it's a war, and I happen to be the second in command after the Prime Minister. So we're going to fight it together, and we're optimistic. We can definitely pull off a victory in this one. But, well, you've been seeing me a lot because there's been a lot going on. Ever since we found out about this COVID crisis, we've been doing lots of things, both locally and with the international agencies. And so that happened even prior to our first case. So it's a preparation that's been ongoing, and we've been just trying to fine-tune it as much as possible. No country can totally be prepared, but obviously we can be as prepared as possibly and as our resources may provide us to be. And that's why recently we had PAHO here, and we had some experts, and they gave us some good advice. They were here to help us to recognize the gaps in our system, which is what it's all about, try to fit in up our gaps so that we can be as prepared as possibly can be. And so even prior to our first case, we're already thinking of a surge capacity. This is why our hospital in Portsmouth was getting done even before having a first case. That's what it's all about, being proactive and getting prepared for any eventuality. And in that regard, that is why when we had all these cases coming in yesterday, our facility in Portsmouth was ready. Had we just waited to get a first case and then prepare for a surge, we would have been in trouble. But we prepared for the surge long before it came. So by the time our first case came, our facility in Portsmouth was ready, which just tells you how well we've been preparing for this eventuality. And as time goes along, we keep preparing even more and more, because we had a capacity of 24 beds in Portsmouth. And now today we made some adjustments and we've actually brought it up to 30 beds. So we have a capacity of 30 beds in Portsmouth as compared to the 24. That's in our St. James facility. And obviously our Douglas Charles facility remains. And we're going to keep our Douglas Charles facility for the more severe cases. That's where we have all our intensive, our Dominica China Friendship Hospital. That's where we'll keep most of our severe cases, and our milder cases we can keep at our St. James facility. But we've done all of that. It takes the logistics involved in having all our staff down there. We have to make sure our staff are comfortable, and we have to provide the best for our staff, because they are the frontline people there, and they are the ones exposed, they are the ones sacrificing their families. So we made the accommodation very comfortable, transported them from their accommodation to the facility. So the transportation issue has been done for them. And so we're very much concerned about their well-being. And there'll be little hiccups here and there. Maybe, as we said, breakfast might come a little late. But I mean, even under normal circumstances, those things happen. So much less in a war and a crisis time, those things can happen. But as I said, we keep doing things every day to just fine-tune the whole process. And it's not just a matter of just the nurses and the doctors related to this facility. We have the other domestic staff, we have the pharmacy staff, we have the laboratory staff, and all of these are being put together so that our facility in Portsmouth can be functional as possible and to the best of the capabilities of our staff, so that we can provide the best service to the patients that we have down there. All our orderlies, our maintenance staff, it's a combined approach that we are adopting so that we can have a facility. And if you have to imagine, we've actually set up a hospital in basically less than a week. So we have to give ourselves some, we have to be very comforted by that people can come together and actually set up a facility in less than a week. This says a lot for us, and you have to compare this to other places that are struggling. People with more facilities than us, more resources than us, and yet we can do all of this in such a short time. So it does say a lot for the dedication of the staff and the people involved in setting that up. So we have to be highly appreciative of such things and comforted by that. But let alone all of this with the facility, there are lots of other departments that are playing their part. Take, for instance, the environmental health. They've been right at the front. They are the first people that our passengers meet, whether it's at the Douglas Charles Airport, whether it was at the ferry terminal, and they're the ones doing the screening and the temperature, and they've been there diligently, on time, getting things done. We must be proud of these people as well. As for our fire and ambulance, we cannot overemphasize how great they have been in this fight. I call the chief and the chief, Doc, where you want me to get to? That's the kind of response we get from our chief when we call him. And as a matter of fact, we sort of fast-tracked their staffing so that some of his guys on duty can get a little rest. So while we pulled in trying to get some new ones for him as quick as possible so that his seasoned firemen can go out there, the drivers, and then the new ones that are coming, they can stay on the base and they can just hold the fort and do the normal little maintenance while his seasoned firemen are out there in the districts getting the patients and transporting them for us. As a matter of fact, yesterday I had a very busy time getting all our different patients from the La Roche community down to Portsmouth, which took time and went up all in the night time actually. So you can just see the sort of effort that they're being put into. But let alone environmental health and the fire and ambulance, even the police as regards to our security at our facilities, both the quarantine facility and our COVID hospital, our COVID facility that is the St. James facility in Portsmouth. The police have been very helpful because obviously we can appreciate the anxiety related to people in quarantine, and family members are pretty much concerned. So the police have a job to do as well. DASPA has been very good as regards to getting all our information. The Ministry of Agriculture was on board. They provided us with many quarantine officers when we had all these people coming from Guadeloupe and Martinique at the ferry terminal. So it's been a very combined approach, and Customs and Immigration, they've been giving us great ideas how to fine-tune the system, and we really appreciate that. And all our maintenance staff who just set up all the beds at the hospital and transporting all the ICU equipment. So it's really heartening. Our Red Cross people, lots of volunteers, so we can help with our screening at the Douglas Charles, at our Dominica China hospital. So, and when you have people just volunteering that they can just do the temperature and check, so we can have a nice screening process at our Dominica China Friendship Hospital. All of these things mean quite a bit to us. But we also know that our staff is going to be under pressure, so we are arranging to have their psychosocial aspect dealt with, and as regards to counseling and to providing for their mental health, because they're going to be burnt out every now and then. They also have family members who need them as well. They're going to be up late night. So we have to consider those things. It's a combined approach, and we're definitely considering all these different things when we're dealing with our COVID crisis here in Dominica. And it goes even beyond all this stuff. When you see all around Roseau that we set up these little pipes, stand pipes that we can wash our hands, and I see the public really making use of it. These are the things that we all can, institute and to get the good habits, because it's our action creates our habits. So if we just keep washing our hands, eventually it becomes a habit, and then that's all. These are the little minor things that actually, well, they might look minor, but they really play a very big part in our defense and our fight against the COVID. And the health promotion, obviously the health promotion has been at the forefront of it. Education is the key here. We have to let people know what's happening, and that's, they'll be doing an excellent job at it. But when the health promotion gives us the information, we have to take it one step further. We can become part of health information, and we have to tell our relatives and our friends. So we are all part of the health promotion. It's not just the department saying those different things, but we have to transmit it to the other people that we meet as we go along. So it's really up to play our part. And while the system does all of this, which I've been telling you all along here, our part now is to exercise and implement the social distancing, which is what we're asking everyone to do. Our first index case led to 9 other cases. So you can see the importance of when we ask you to quarantine, we really want you to take it seriously. We know what we're telling you. The evidence is there, the facts are there. The international community is saying it, the international agencies are saying it, we have the experience in it, we know about it. So just play your part. The system has been put in place for you, you have to play a part. It's a combination of both the system and you, the citizens. We ask you to quarantine, just stay at home and just quarantine. 1 case led to 9 cases. These 9 cases could have been avoided if we had a proper quarantine of that individual. So let not let it happen again. The other case, he was pretty much well quarantined, and we're doing the contact tracing for him. And up till now, we haven't got any from him, but obviously waiting for further tests. And while we're doing all this contact tracing, if we get any positives of these contacts, we also continue the contact tracing to see if we have any of those other ones. So take, for instance, in the La Roche area, we have our health team doing the contact tracing, and then we have to actually pull out some of our staff from the other health districts to help with our La Plaine Health District so we can do more contact tracing. So it's an ongoing process. We might have a district that might not have any cases yet, no suspected case, so we take some of our staff here to help the La Plaine Health District, which is what is going on. And then we continue our contact tracing in those areas. But the point is, as I keep stressing, we have to exercise social distancing. It really doesn't cost anything. Granted, there may be the little hiccups and the little, well, if we have social distancing, we may have elderly people in the community. Those elderly people might need, well, she wants to get a pound of flour in the shop or a little pound of sugar. Some other person from some other civic group, whether it's some sport club, whether it's the church community, whether it's the teachers, whether it's the village improvement committee, we have people to maybe just lend a hand and just go and get the pound of sugar for the elderly lady, rather than to have her come and go to the walk to the shop to get those little things. So these are the things we can do besides just the constant washing of our hands, besides just the social distancing. We can also help each other when we just lend a helping hand to the elderly so that they can stay at home, because they're the most vulnerable people. And so we have to help them in that regard. But as the Prime Minister said, different measures have been taken. And as time goes along, we keep adjusting accordingly. And so here we are. We have this cluster in La Roche. So with a cluster like this, obviously, we have to talk about border restrictions and in terms of restricting our public gathering, which we wouldn't have done initially because we were not in that stage. But now we're in this stage, yes, we can do those things. It's a fluid situation. It's work in progress. As things happen, we adjust accordingly, which is what has been happening ever since this COVID-19 started off. So now we reach the stage of restricting public gatherings, and now we've reached the stage of restricting, well, our borders. So this is because we've reached the cluster stage. This we could not have done before. And if we reach another stage, we will adjust accordingly. So this is exactly what we've been doing. We have the science, we have the evidence, we know what we've been doing, and that is how we're going to continue to do all of these things. And all of these actions that we have, these are guided by international regulations. We don't just do things for doing things sake. We have the science, we have the facts to back up what we're doing here. But I just cannot overemphasize that we have to play our part. We have to adhere to the instructions. The health promotion unit has been putting it out for us. It's just up to us to just adhere to all those instructions. In short, we have to act responsibly. We have to take our health, it's our responsible. Our health belongs to us, and we have to just do what we've been doing and what we've been told to do, listen to all the messages, spread the word, and very importantly, we should avoid spreading negative stuff. It doesn't help anyone. This disease has no boundaries. This disease, it's just anyone, regardless of class, color, religion. It just has absolutely no boundaries, and we must play our part. And also, when we have the medical staff, we've also put it also in the public service. So we have different subcommittees in the cabinet that are handling the different aspects of our defense and our preparedness. So for the contact tracing, we have a subcommittee. For our logistics, we have a subcommittee. For our COVID hospital, we have a subcommittee, and all of these come together. So it's a combined approach. Our health promotion unit, we have lots of hotline numbers, which Ms. Harry will tell us all our hotline numbers before we leave. That's very important as well. And then if we look at all the other areas and avenues, how our international friends have helped us with the People's Republic of China and Cuba, whether it's in terms of supplies or whether it's in terms of medical personnel. So you see it's a very broad approach, a very combined approach, and this is the only way we can fight this COVID-19. So we must stay focused. We must leave the negative stuff aside. As I said, this disease has no boundaries, no borders. Anyone can be affected, and let us just do what we have to do. Just stay focused and just do what we have to do. Hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, and social distancing. This is not a time for party. This is not a time for fun. This is a time to stay home and talk stories and listen to the radio, watch your TV. And I think that's the best way we can all be safe. So, my dear Dominicans, social distancing, hand washing, respiratory etiquette. Let's be careful how we sneeze. Let's be careful how we cough. Let us help each other. A little message for the elderly people, and let us spread the word around, and let us definitely adhere to the quarantine measures. Those of you at home, you're on home quarantine, we've told you for home quarantine. We know the benefits of home quarantine. You saw the problems with home quarantine. If it's not done properly, one case can lead to 9 cases. And this disease can affect everyone. So it's my plead, and it's the government's plead, it's the Ministry of Health plead, that please observe all the different measures that we're putting in place for you. It's definitely going to help us. And if we do this, definitely we can fight COVID-19. So let's stay focused and let's do what we're supposed to do. And I really thank all of you for listening, the listeners at home. Let's spread the word, let's spread the news. We can do it, we can fight it. Let's just stay focused, let's stay positive. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. And as he promised, I will be providing you with all of the hotline numbers. And these are the hotline numbers. Any other numbers circulating are not the hotline numbers. And please keep in mind what the hotline is for. As was mentioned earlier, it is not to be abused. It is not to be called just to see if it's working, but it is to be used for actual emergencies. If you need advice, if you feel ill, you have flu-like symptoms, you are welcome to call. Whatever illness you're feeling and you'd like some guidance as to what to do next, feel free to call. If you've observed something in your community and you would like us to be aware, then feel free to call. And these are the hotline numbers: 448-2151, 448-2153, 448-2156, 611-4325, and 1-800-219. Of course, we will be making announcements over the airwaves, reminding you of those phone numbers. We'd like to thank this evening all of our presenters for accommodating us and for giving us the information. We'd like to thank the media for coming through this evening as well. We'd like to thank all the listeners and viewers this evening. Of course, it may sound often like we're repeating ourselves, but we only do this repetition because we would like everyone to understand just how critical this information is. It's not because we just want to stand here and talk. So when the Ministry of Health and the other experts come up and give you this information over and over again, it's because it is very important. So we ask that you take heed. And of course, we ask that credible sources be where you get your information from. So we thank you for your attention. Have a good evening.